Stephen Inglis. He was the collaborator for the last seminar. At that time, he was the Director General of Research and Collections at the Canadian Museum of Civilizations. After that, he set up a whole museum for the Cree Indians in Ontario. And anyway, I'll turn it over to him to make a few remarks.
I'm the first person on the program. Shall I just say a few remarks and then start? May I? Okay. When Debbie first suggested this to me, I was here last year, and she said, do you think it might be possible to bring back people from 20 years ago? And I was thinking to myself, well, if we can find enough, living people that are still at work after this long time, we'll go for it. So we were extremely gratified with the response, because we have many people here who spoke at our first seminar, and all those people, from my perspective, are still working in their field, and they're still very enthusiastic, and they're pushing the knowledge agenda. Both our Indian colleagues, our colleagues from other countries, have continued their important work and their interest in this topic. And I was very touched when I saw that Jan Brouwer from Mysore had come on his motorcycle again, because he came 20 years ago on his motorcycle all the way from Mysore, and he's back again on his motorcycle. So it shows to me that the topic that we're discussing today, and it's not only the 20 years that have passed in between, but it's also the future. And the future of the people we've worked with, and the future of the people that are working in the crafts in India and elsewhere. So when I was thinking about my remarks this morning on the panel, my wife, Erica, who's here today, and who was a student of Tamil when I was doing my research, and is a graduate of Madurai Kamaraj University's program. She said to me, "You're old, and you can say anything you bloody well want." So that made me feel, yeah, it made me feel relaxed. So I thought, though, I would begin our seminar and begin our thoughts about maker and meaning by showing some images from my research. And the reason I want to do that is to document and to honor craftspeople for their skill and for the grace and the power they bring to their making. And I also thought I would do that in order to point out the matrix between traditional craft on the operational level as a domestic activity, and also on the spiritual or religious level. And the third reason I wanted to do it is because I think images are part of the language that we use, not only to document, but also to discuss and to record the work of artists and artisans. And I was reading an article by Ruth Pawar Jabvala on the plane coming over, and what she had to say I thought was interesting. She said that throughout her career as a screenwriter, she realized that one sentence in a film is like 15 or 20 sentences in a book. And likewise, in anthropology, what it's taught me is that an image can expand long beyond the whatever anyone could write about it. So I'm just going to show a few images, and then I'm going to comment on the people that are the subject of the images, and just a little bit about their future and their condition and circumstances today. So I just wanted to introduce you to some of the people I worked with. More than 20 years ago. I started 40 years ago, but certainly 20 years ago I was still meeting with these people. These are potters from Tamil Nadu, from Madurai and Ramnad districts. And these are Velar potters who are indigenous potters of Tamil Nadu. You may know that in Tamil Nadu there's many different kinds of potters using different technologies. Many of them are Telugu speakers who've migrated here. Other potters come from other places. They have different tools, they have different ideas. But these are the indigenous potters of Tamil Nadu who are related to the land they live on. Next. And so just a few photographs of them doing their work. Next. And in this tradition, which is the most ancient tradition in Tamil Nadu, women can only beat out the pots, the bottoms of the pots. Men can only turn them on the wheel. So it's a male-female contribution to the work that is, just central. Not only to the making of pottery, but central to the kinship organization of the community, so that every family has to have women and men in order to be successful in their craft. Next. So here you see some of the domestic products that these potters are making all the time. I worked in 120 different villages around Madurai city. So going down into Madurai to Ramnad and up north and east and west of Madurai. If you could go back just 1 minute. So, he's making feeders for cows, and he's making lamps, adapu for cooking, little stoves, and these are chicken coops, so they can put the chickens in at night and they won't be taken away, and then also storage for grains. And here's the kind of thing that people were interested in about potters a century ago. And this is a company painting from South India showing the same kinds of things all being worked at. However, I know that these are potters from another part of India working in Tamil Nadu because men are beating out the pots, which could never be done in the community that I worked in. Yes. Here they are bringing the pots into places where they can sell them, and from the outlying villages. Next. And in the village I worked in, the pots lined up in front of houses for people to just buy. Now there's many relationships in pottery that have to do with exchanging pots for grain, making pots for weddings, and so forth, which are traditionally passed between potters and their patrons. But these are ones just for sale. Yeah. But wherever you see pots being made in this traditional world of pottery, you also see images being made. So pots are just the basis, the baseline for a whole great world of sculpture. And these are little images, pillai, images of children that are given by women to the gods, the local gods, in a request for fertility. And wherever you see pots being stored and worked on, there's also images being worked on. Yes. And this group of people that I worked with are also the priests in the local temples. So every village has 4 or 5 small temples on the exterior which are served by potters. And this is a potter. You see he's wearing a sacred thread, Nupovita, because he is a priest and he's offering the puja to clay images that are sponsored by the landowners. Next. So they're also making a whole series of special ritual pots for different circumstances. These are pots made to plant the 9 grains that are grown in Tamil Nadu, and they're just grown until they flower, and then they're put into the river, and this is part of a ritual to ask the local deities for a bountiful harvest. Yeah. And At the same time, they're making a whole range of things to be offered to the deities. These are all little snakes and scorpions and so forth that a person can give and say, please, don't let these bite me when I'm working out in the fields and walking and so forth. And everyone in the community is participating to some extent in this, children learning how to paint these things. Yeah. This is another kind of ritual pot. It's an Agni Chatti, a fire pot that people carry as a vow to the village deity. And that's just a burning pot that you hold with your hands in order to show your devotion. Yeah. When? Between 1972 and about 1985. So, along with all these other things I've shown you, one of the most spectacular and well-known part of their work is making horses of clay to offer to the deity. Next. And here they are, just working away on the porches of their houses, starting to create horses for the next festival. And that can be an all-year task, because many of the potters, such as the one I just showed you, are working for 4, 10, 8 temples, and there's festivals going on at a fairly regular basis. So I know this looks fun, but what they're doing is the horses' necks are still too soft to hold them up, so they put them in little bowls of sand just so they can dry nicely. Next. And then finally painting and then putting bamboo and straw around them so they can be carried from the village where the potters are working out to these small temples. Yep. Next. And so the potters are excellent at making pots, throwing pots. This was a great potter when I was there, but also making the images. And you see the relationship between them and the pieces that they're making are very intimate and also very important for everybody who's going to worship there. And then large-size images, full-size, life-size images of the local deities, also in clay, and being dressed in order to be taken out for the festival. Next. Now, none of the things that are taken in clay are ever taken away from the temple. They just disappear on site because they're very low-fired, and after 10 years they start to fall apart. And I just wanted to show you the way that these things accumulate. Next. And so in the mountains around Tamil Nadu, there's temples where there's thousands of clay horses from hundreds of years of festivals. And they're just left there, and then the heads start falling off, and then the legs start falling off, and they literally sink into the ground and disappear as the ants are eating them and so forth, but never touched. So I think this is second to last slide. I just wanted to show you that this is not only a modeling tradition, it's a magnificent modeling tradition in Tamil Nadu. And this is a pure example of an old figure, but you can see the power and the beauty of the modeling of this figure. These are, in my opinion, amongst all the arts of India that I study and teach about, marvelous examples of sculpture. Yeah. And they also build big pieces. So this is a priest in a small temple near Madurai, and these are the figures that he and his family members have made over the years. They're brick with plaster. They used to be clay. Next. And these are the same kinds of figures in pure clay from the past. They're not making these anymore, but they'd like to. There's just no patronage to do it. Next. And here's an example. There's the potter who's just renovated this whole thing, and all the men of the village have gathered to do a puja because it's new and important. And then there's a whole range of other duties and responsibilities the potters have as priests in the temple, including sacrifices. Yeah. And finally, a whole range of other responsibilities that potters have that you wouldn't necessarily link with clay, including taking pots for festivals. These fellows here are impersonating the local gods, wearing their costumes, and they go into a trance, and then they'll speak for the god. So they are the vehicles by which people can talk with the local gods. And people can go up to them and say, you know, my son is sick, what can I do? And then they can give the answer, which usually the answer is, come to my temple and give me 5 horses. So that's how it works. And the last slide is just one of the small fields of new work that potters do. This is a potter from the region that I worked in who's now in Chennai, and what he does is make these plaques of sort of quasi-classical goddesses that go into hotels. And, you know, you've been in these big hotels and there's fashionable plaques of gods and goddesses and so forth. It keeps a few people busy. That's my images for you. So I just had a few more things to say. One is, both in the area that I worked in, and I would say all over Tamil Nadu and in most of South India, pottery is waning. It's going down. There is no new generation of potters. Young potters want to get a job that pays better than pottery does. And the whole religious world that supports pottery is also in some ways fading. Replaced by cement, plastic, stainless steel, aluminum. These are the vessels that people are using more and more frequently. The types of domestic clay products that are still in demand are insufficient to sustain in anything like the volume even 20 years ago, much less 40 years ago. In Kanyakumari district, for example, which was one place for which we have some statistics, there was approximately 2,500 potters working in 2001, and now there's below 700. So you can see by that how many there's going to be 10 years from now or 20 years from now. Even on Pongal, the festival that's being celebrated now, which always used clay pots, people are starting to use stainless steel. In the village area where I began research in the early 70s, there are now, there was 100 families of potters in the area that I worked in. Now there's none. There's none at all. They have relatives in their lineages that live further out in the countryside who are still making pots. But for them, a big potter village near the city of Madurai, it's over. Now, what is happening to those people? Many of them are going to wage labor. Many of them are going to work in factories where they get paid much more than they could make by doing pottery. And a tiny fraction of them are moving into more modern uses of clay, like the fellow that I showed you making those plaques for hotels. Also knickknacks for craft boutiques and so forth. But that can only encompass a tiny, tiny percentage. 1 in 1,000 will get work doing that. Now, why is this important for anyone? Well, it's of course important for the potters because they have the skill that's based on their spiritual knowledge, their knowledge of materials, their knowledge and skills. And, but it's also, pottery has been the most potent way of tracing history in India since the very beginning. There's no doubt about that. And archaeology continues to show, including archaeology that's still going on at Nadu near Pondicherry and at Pumpuhar at the end of the Kaveri River. We're still learning about early civilization in Tamil Nadu based almost solely on pottery. So it's been a very important part of our knowledge of what's going on in this area. Although now we can see a time when there won't be any pottery in the remains that we leave behind us. Now, I titled my first talk here 20 years ago, Pottery and Power. And what was that power of potters that I was talking about? Well, it was based on their possibility, their power. They had no land. They had no education. They were anti-education. They didn't own land. The only thing they had was their knowledge of the spiritual world that people wanted to have access to, and the means of getting in touch with it through these clay images. And their power was to withdraw their services. They could pull them back and say, no, you're not paying me enough. No, you're violating something, and so I'm not going to perform these rituals for you. And that was enough to make people change their minds. So I'm just saying that was the power they had. It's a power over people's crops, over their fertility, over their health, and people responded to that. Their method was a traditional one, and their power was the sacred services that they could provide. The medium was clay. And I wish I was starting this conference with a more positive and optimistic viewpoint on this particular craft system, but I can't say that. So I'm going to leave it to my colleagues and the people who speak after me to look at ways that craft traditions may find a place in the modern world. And I hope that happens, and I hope they'll tell us about some of those things. Thank you very much.
Comment on what Stephen had said. Tamil Nadu government last year banned the taking of clay from riverbeds and streams. So basically, it's almost impossible to get clay. So it'll be very difficult in the future for potters. On the other hand,
the other thing they banned was firing near any other buildings. And potters all along have fired their work in their residence areas. But that throws sparks up here. And so now anyone who lives near a town can't fire. So, you know, there's some real barriers besides the ones that I mentioned.
yeah, but despite all that, last year I did a round of the INR shrines where all these figures the ritual figures that he showed are made for. And I went with a woman called Julie Wayne, who's documented all of the INR shrines in Tamil Nadu. And I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that there were at least 3 or 4 times more of these shrines than I had ever imagined that there were. And for every one which had a festival only 2 or 3 years, or maybe after only 5 years instead of annually, there were shrines which had their annual festivals. So it is still a very potent ritual in Tamil Nadu, and we'll have to see what happens as far as the clay and the actual potters go. But what he said also, that none of his potters are there. Yeah, Susan? They feel that the water won't, it will absorb into somehow for the preservation of the river.
Yeah.
I don't actually understand it really.
Could I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
Those of you who've looked at rivers in Tamil Nadu, for example, over the long past, have noticed that the banks of the river have expanded until most rivers are a vast sand with a little trickle running down the middle of it. That's because builders and contractors have been taking sand from the river base and the banks for years and years. And this is backing up huge trucks, filling them with the sand from the river and taking them to construction sites. So that's the target of the ban. It's not the potters who go out and take a little ritual thing to do their work. But this contractors has ruined their ability.
Sand is one thing and clay is another.
Well, clay needs sand. So they have to get sand from somewhere. And they have their own places to get clay, often the same river, but they need the sand.
Yeah, well, we all know there's a big sand mafia here, and now they're trying to use artificial sand in
And
India.
were any of the horses you saw at the INR shrines clay?
Yes.
Last year?
Yes, many, many, many. In fact, we went into one village which had not hundreds, but thousands of horses. And we went into the potters community. They all had nice houses, and they were busy making. They said, we have an order of 50 horses. Each villager pays 2,000 rupees for the horse. And so we work over 3 months. We do all the horses, and this goes on every year. So it's a very exciting trip to go around Tamil Nadu to look at the shrines. On our trip, we will see 1 or 2 shrines. So a little bit about the history. I'm sure Sindhura has to talk about this. We have one more paper on pottery. But they've discovered in Tamil Nadu that Tamils were much more literate at a very early age than they'd ever expected, because there's Brahmi script on many of the shards, the pottery shards that they've found in and around Tamil Nadu. Okay, we are ahead of schedule. I just wanted to say that one of our speakers today, Niranjan, who was here this morning, his father-in-law just passed away and he had to leave. So he is a Kalamkari craftsperson, and we will, I think that Ritu Sethi has, she will talk about her interaction with Niranjan. Okay.
I'm Geeta, one of the coordinators of the seminar. Stephen, we were fortunate enough, Stephen comes here often. He was here for the popular art seminar. He has done research on many different topics from Tamil Nadu. I really wonder how, as a young man, he chose India and how he chose some extraordinary craft like this in particular. Like the photographs were extraordinary. You know, living in Tamil Nadu, we do see a lot of photographs on pottery, but every single photo of yours speaks a lot. You know, it tells a story. So I'm really fascinated how all these people have continued their research and, you know, taken to another level. And all the scholars and speakers, Debbie was so glad that all of them she invited have come after 20 years. I'm sure the structure was in here and all that. And the surprise was Jan Brouwer. So we were going through the list of the pickups and all that. And then we see by bike. I said, from where? He said, by bike. Actually, he's a biker, he says. And then I went through his bio. It was so interesting. Anyway, he'll talk more about that. So it's been a very fulfilling a journey and a learning curve for all of us at DakshinaChitra. And even in DakshinaChitra, we have the traditional craftsman, the master craft person. He works there, but his son who has taken up, he's very old, but he's still working. If you go to the pottery unit here, Ramu Velar. Yeah, he's a master craftsman, he's won awards and all that. And we sometimes feel the son is not up to that, but we really can't blame. You know, each individual has his own skills, and so it's a different kind of learning, because we see craft and we have the ceramic artist. He has his ceramic setup, ceramicist who does contemporary art, And so everything goes together in DakshinaChitra. We have the craft bazaar, and we notice that even the simple craftsman, even a jewelry maker, he puts different things together. They're trying to be innovative, creative, and we have seen the changes ourselves working here at the DakshinaChitra. And all the speakers and scholars, when you go through what they I know they're going to talk about what happened to the craft in the last 20 years, but the amount of research, work, and their contribution to craft revival has been immense. We're really proud to have all of you here, and the kind of work you've done with Indian artisans in particular. Thank you.